Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where everybody is. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 25th of our webinar in the Local Government and Subnational Government Information Webinar Series. And today we are focusing on the reflections on the engagement with cities and regions to enhance the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework and the road to CBD COP15. So my name is Ingrid Coetzee. I'm a Director of Nature and Biodiversity and Health at ICLEI, Cities Biodiversity Centre. I'm based here in Cape Town and I'm going to be your moderator for today. I want to also just recognize our various partners. This webinar is brought to you. ICLEI is one of the members of the Global Task Force of Local and Regional Governments, and we are the focal point for the CBD Convention. We have many other partners who you see represented on the slide, and we also just want to recognize the generous support of the biodiversity post-20 biodiversity framework support from the EU, which is supported also by Expertise France. So this is our agenda for today. After the welcomes, there's going to be a very short roadmap update, which I will speak to. And then we have some recordings. Unfortunately, our presenters of this morning, Sue Campbell and Renata Gomez, are not available this afternoon, but we have great recordings for you and we will play those. I will then give the reflections on the local government position, and Xu Zhu, who is my colleague in Beijing, we will give a recording of his as well. And hopefully we will have some time left over at the end for questions. Before we continue, I just want to make a few housekeeping rules known. First of all, you will note that all attendees have been muted and their video is off, and we do this to save bandwidth. However, if you have any questions, please use the chat box. We have staff watching the chat box, so if there's a question, please enter the question in there. If we're not able to answer it in the time allotted, we will certainly endeavor to send a written response. So I ask that you also just add your email so that we can do a follow-up afterwards. Then I must just also inform everybody that we are recording this webinar, and by attending in the webinar, we understand that you give your consent to be recorded, and we will also share our YouTube link with all of our attendees after the webinar. So, as I said, we are on our 25th one. You can see the arrow. We have very few left before the date of the COP later this year. And there's on the right hand, you can see there's a website link. If you want to listen to any of the previous recordings of webinars, please use that link and you will find them all there. Now, very quickly, we're nearing the end of our roadmap. It's been a long journey from 2018. We're almost at the end of 2021. And you can see where we are, the little red star. We're in the moment and just started July, and we're having the last of the dialogues between national, subnational, and local governments that have been organized together with those various countries: Peru, Colombia, Canada, China, Mexico, also in South Africa. These have been taking place during the course of June, and they end sort of in mid-July. Then our next big CBD process milestone event will be the open-ended working group, the third meeting, which is scheduled to take place from the 23rd of August to the 3rd of September. Then, of course, there's the IUCN World Conservation Congress, which will be taking place as a blended event. So there will be online as well as in-person events from the 3rd to the 11th of September. And they're also planning a IUCN Local Action Summit on the 3rd of September. There's a number of other events, but we're also hoping that we will be able to have the COP later this year. I'm sure there will be further notices coming from the Secretariat of the CBD on exactly what the plans are, when that will be held. and hopefully we will also have the 7th Biodiversity Summit for cities and subnational governments, which is an official parallel event to the CBD COPs. You'll see on the screen there are two websites given at the bottom. And for those of you that missed the IUCN webinars that would lead into the Local Action Summit, there is the websites where you can find more information about those events. So our speakers this afternoon, the first one will be Sue Campbell. Sue is the Policy Manager of Biodiversity and International Engagement at the Scottish Government, and she's based in Edinburgh. And then Renata Gomez is the Biodiversity Program Manager for Regions 4. And both Sue and Renata are great friends of ours, and they have been in these webinars a lot of times in the past. Then it is myself and my colleague, Xu Zhu. Xu Zhu is our regional director and the Chinese representative in the Italy East Asia Secretariat, and he's currently in Beijing. And then, of course, as I said, myself, and I am based here in Cape Town. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to hand back to my very competent technical team to start the video for Sue.
My name is Sue Campbell from the Edinburgh Process Secretariat and the Scottish Government. I want to pass on my thanks to the organisers of today's event for this invitation to speak to you today. I'm sorry I'm not able to be with you in person, but I hope this video message is helpful in describing the Edinburgh process for subnational governments, cities and local authorities on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework and the progress that we've made so far. So the Edinburgh process has been a fantastic global partnership approach developed over the last 2 years, with the Scottish Government leading the engagement of the subnational and local constituency for the UN Convention on Biological Diversity on their development of the post-2020 GBF and new biodiversity targets for 2030. The Edinburgh process could not have happened without the tireless support of all the partner organisations that you see here, particularly in these very challenging of times. The Edinburgh process gathered the views of over 400 participants through 3 online consultations covering the zero draft of the post-2020 GBF, the existing subnational plan of action, and the Edinburgh Declaration. This was supplemented with a number of thematic sessions on specific issues. The outcomes of the consultation on the plan of action were used to develop the draft CBD decision and are presented in more detail in our formal reports to the CBD, in the documents which CBD has published, and these are underpinned by the commitments set out in the Edinburgh Declaration. The Edinburgh Declaration has currently been signed or endorsed by over 150 governments and organisations. Our consultations showed a lack of reference to subnational authorities within the post-2020 GBF and a lack of emphasis on vertical integration, despite the reference to the whole of government approach. This is important when some regions are implementing 70% of biodiversity legislation at the subnational and local level. The consultations indicate that subnational and local governments shouldn't be just another stakeholder, but that their competency and implementation should be recognised throughout the post-2020 framework. Subnational and local governments are in many cases uniquely placed to implement the framework through, for example, mainstreaming and in undertaking nature-based solutions. We find that whilst subnational governments have engaged with the existing plan of action, which was endorsed at COP10 in Aichi under Decision 1022, there is still room for improvement across all areas. And that's why we put forward a recommendation to the CBD for a renewed plan of action and dedicated decision for subnational and local governments. This is currently being considered by the CBD's subsidiary body for implementation under Agenda Item 11 on mainstreaming. We've had a positive response to our recommendation, and we are continuing to engage with parties to ensure there's an increased recognition of the role of subnational and local governments in developing the post-2020 GBF. And we're engaging with parties to adopt the dedicated decision at COP15. So how will the plan of action be implemented? Firstly, it will support collaboration between subnational governments, cities and local authorities and their national governments. The aim is to take a whole of government approach as called for in the post-2020 GBF and to ensure harmonisation between different levels of government whilst drawing upon their different strengths. The plan of action is a flexible framework which can be adapted for the situation in each country. If the long-term approach to mainstreaming is to be adopted, then subnational governments should be involved in the platforms and discussions which will enable better mainstreaming of biodiversity at subnational levels. And this is a multi-stakeholder engagement platform called for in the declaration. The advisory committees for subnational and local governments established under Decision 1022 will continue to operate and advise on subnational ambitions by participating in CBD processes. And finally, subnational and local governments bring their own finances and resources, but we recognise that it's important for some of those to be able to access global funding streams, private and philanthropic finances. The subnational constituency is currently considering how best to organise itself cooperatively to ensure that the post-2020 framework is successfully implemented at the subnational level, using the plan of action as a basis. In order to streamline reporting on the plan of action, it's envisaged that this should be done through parties' national reports. A high percentage of parties are already reporting on subnational activities currently, so this shouldn't be an additional burden. Information captured on commitment platforms such as Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature can also contribute to reporting efforts. Finally, an interim review of the effectiveness of the plan of action will be presented to SBI 5 as part of the regular review of the implementation of the objectives of the Convention and its protocols, the post-2020 GBF and the long-term approach to mainstreaming. The Edinburgh process builds upon progress made across the last decade to ensure that vertically harmonised approach to delivering the post-20 GBF. Building upon previous subnational declarations such as the Carta de Sao Paulo and the Quintana Roo Communique, it demonstrates to the Convention the willingness and readiness of subnational governments across the world to play a greater role in implementing the framework. The declaration contains 10 commitments by subnational governments, cities and local authorities, and 4 calls to action by parties for the next decade. It's available in 9 languages and is found on the website shown here. With over 150 signatures already, we continue to invite subnational governments, cities and local authorities across the world to join the growing support for the plan of action ahead of COP15. We're also inviting national governments to publicly endorse the declaration and the outcomes it seeks. This will be important to gathering support for the COP decision. Some of the declaration commitments are set out here, alongside our calls to action by CBD parties. We and our Edinburgh process partners are hugely enthused by the support the declaration has already generated for this action, and we want to continue to build upon that towards COP15. It's not an onerous process to sign up to the declaration. Your application is processed by our small Edinburgh process team, usually within a couple of weeks. The declaration should be signed by a political leader representing their subnational government, city or the local authority. Please send us an email application, including the information asked for here, and if needed, any letter of designated authority. Also, be sure to use an organisational or official email address in order to aid our vetting process. Once verified, you'll receive a confirmation email and your organisation and the name of the person signing will appear on our web pages. We will submit the signatures to the Convention at their upcoming meetings, including at COP15. And this will show the level of support by the subnational constituency for the plan of action and for a dedicated COP decision. It's vital that we gather state party support to pave the way for the adoption of a dedicated decision at COP15, ensuring the greater inclusion of subnational and local governments within the post-20 GBF. And we also want adopted a renewed plan of action for subnational authorities, which will act as a framework for implementation over the next decade. So, as well as signing the Edinburgh Declaration, you can support the Edinburgh process by first highlighting the Edinburgh process reports to your national focal point. These set out the findings from our consultations and highlight the important issues for subnational governments relating to scientific and technical and implementation aspects. And these reports are already published on the CBD's webpage. And second, you can ask your national focal point to support the updated plan of action and the adoption of a dedicated decision for subnational governments, local authorities and cities at COP15. Both of these actions can be taken forward by issuing a letter to your national focal point. We've prepared a draft template for anyone who wishes to engage in this way. And you can find the template on our Edinburgh process webpage that's listed on this next and final slide. If anyone would like further information, please contact the Edinburgh Process Secretariat at the email shown here. Our Edinburgh Process webpage is also shown here, as are the various publications which I mentioned relating to the papers on the CBD webpage. I'd like to thank the organisers again for inviting me to speak to you today, and I'd like to thank you for listening. Thanks very much and take care.
Thank you very much, Sue, in her absence. And our next speaker is going to be Renata Gomez, and she comes from Regions 4, and she is going to give reflections from the subnational government constituency on the past subsidiary body meetings, the SAPSTA and the SBI, the implementation one, and the outcomes of this. So I will hand back to our technical team for that next video, please. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here. My name is Renata Gomez, and I'm with Regions 4. I'm the responsible of the Biodiversity program, and I'm here to share with you the significance and the importance of having a plan of action come out of CBD COP15 from the perspective of subnational governments and, of course, Regions 4 perspective. So I would like to begin with a brief introduction of on the general objectives that we are pursuing with the plan of action on subnational governments, cities, and other local authorities. Basically, what we need is increase our engagement to support the implementation of national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and of course, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, improve the exchange of lessons learned, and support subnational cities and other local authorities in this process. We need a plan of action that identifies, enhances, and disseminates policy tools, guidelines to facilitate subnational action on biodiversity, and of course, that build capacity. And we need a plan of action that helps us facilitate the development or awareness raising programs on biodiversity. Basically, and in sum, what we need is a plan of action that engages actively the advisory committees on subnational governments and the advisory committee on local governments to provide input and support to the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We do this, we at Regions 4, we are foreseeing that we can do this, of course, like I said, with the platform that the advisory committee provides, and we are the coordinators of this platform, but also through initiatives like the Regions for Biodiversity Learning Platform. I will very briefly share with you the very basic keys to these two initiatives and how we at Regions 4 are envisioning its use within the plan of action. Basically, the advisory committee was created by the CBD through decision 10/22. This is the specific decision that we want to build upon, and that we are hoping that increases and steps up the ambition for subnational cities and local authorities within the CBD. Of course, this decision was adopted in COP10. It created the advisory committee that is now coordinated, like I said, by Regions 4 and the government of Quebec. We basically advocate for subnational governments at the heart of the CBD negotiations, and we facilitate a dialogue between the members of the committee and the different stakeholders, including, of course, the parties to the CBD. We foster partnerships to support subnational efforts on the ground by fostering international cooperation, of course, among regions. And we increase leadership and collaboration among the members of the committee. Also, we use the learning platform that I mentioned before to provide technical input and create knowledge that is useful to the global discussions on biodiversity, discussions that are going to be shared through the channel of the advisory committee. So having a platform that is dedicated to gather this kind of knowledge and to foster exchange and to provide a collaborative environment is essential, because we need the plan of action to come and foster and support these initiatives that already exist. And this is, of course, at the subnational level of government. One example on how we do this work is we create reports, information documents that are useful to our discussions and that gather recommendations to the CBD parties on specific topics. This, the report that you can see on your screen is the most recent one that we submitted as an information document to SBI3, the subsidiary body on implementation, and that gathers recommendation around capacity building, opportunities to strengthening partnerships, mechanisms to monitor implementation, and the obstacles that are blocking the mainstreaming of biodiversity at the subnational level of government. With this said, we need to think of a plan of action that actually implements and channels what we are already doing and that we want to do even better, right? So the actions that are the plan of action aims to take are the following. Development and implementation of biodiversity strategies, of course, and action plans that are reflecting the involvement of national governments. Of course, we are aiming at harmonization between levels of government and mainstreaming. We also hope that one of the actions is resource mobilization, so much needed for our level of government. And I highlighted the following three because they are specifically important for the initiatives that we are Regions 4 are developing. One, capacity development. The next one, communication, education, and public awareness. And the next one is assessment and improved information for decision making. These three in particular are important because those are the fields in which we at Regions 4 have been gathering our efforts on, specifically in capacity development and in improving and in making the case of how critical and important subnational governments are in the implementation of the convention. Like I said, it's quite a challenge to be able to showcase what subnational governments are doing. And we believe that gathering this knowledge is essential to actually fulfill the actions that we are hoping to get in the plan of action. One initiative that we are hoping to launch at the upcoming CBD, and that is closely related to what I've been talking about, the importance of capacity building and so on, is the case study database, which is a permanent initiative of Regions 4, and that is, of course, a collection on the practice and safeguarding biodiversity at the subnational level of government. It aims at developing a robust knowledge database of innovative solutions on the subnational experience of the implementation of the global biodiversity targets more importantly, it aims at turning good practices into tools and making them replicable and accessible to subnational governments all over the world. As I have mentioned before, we know that it's fundamental to promote this experience sharing and this knowledge that some subnational governments have. So the thematic areas that we are focusing are the ones that you can see on your screen. As you can see, they're very broad. And we strongly believe that the lessons that subnational governments gather in one place of the world can and actually fulfill the mandate of the plan of actions by doing this kind of work. And yeah, we at Regions 4 would be very happy to hear from you and to get in touch. In the next slide, you're going to see my contact information and of course a link in which you can learn more of what we are doing and the next steps that we're taking towards the CBD COP15. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Renata, and also for those very valuable resources that you referred to. I see some of my colleagues have put those links in the chat box. It's my turn to present now. I'm just going to share my screen again and then just turn my video off. Let me just see here. Here you are. Right, so I'm going to reflect a little bit about from the perspective of cities and local governments. And it has also quite an interesting history, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the history first. We're looking back for more than a decade. We're looking at 2006, where there was the Local Action for Biodiversity program, which was a joint initiative between ICLEI and IUCN. And following that, there was a meeting at the COP in the next year, 2007, where 32 mayors got together in Curitiba. And they came out with this Curitiba Declaration on Cities and Biodiversity. And this was the first instance where mayors committed to contributing to the CBD Convention objectives and reaching the 2010 biodiversity target. And in event, these two events, the Local Action for Biodiversity program and the mayors meeting in Curitiba, led to the next big milestone, and that was the first of the summits. Initially, it was just cities, later also subnational governments, and that took place in the city of Bonn as an official parallel event to the CBD COP, and gave rise to what we know as the Bonn Declaration. And indeed, this proud history of summits as official parallel events of the CBD COPs have continued right up to now. And every time there's also a declaration in which the cities and subnational governments share their achievements, but also make their ambitions known. And the declarations are always then presented to the CBD plenary. Now, 2010 was a milestone here, and it was pivotal for as far as the engagement of cities and subnational governments is concerned, because that was the year that the first plan of action was adopted at COP, which dealt with the role of cities and subnational governments in the implementation of the convention, but also achieving at that stage, the biodiversity strategic framework, which has come to an end last year. And I think the important thing about that plan of action is it sets out a framework for what cities and subnational governments can do. Now, that initial framework was quite tentative. The language is very soft. And then, of course, the next big step was at Sharm el-Sheikh, the COP, CBD COP there. There was the announcement by the CBD that they are going to embark on a new consultative process to come up with a new framework, and a call to all stakeholders, but specifically also cities and subnational governments, to mobilize and to participate and to make their ambitions and their priorities known. And as a result of that, ICLEI with its other partners, the Regions 4 and a number of others, took on this challenge, and we started mobilizing our subnational governments. One of the things that we did was, for example, to start this monthly webinar series. And then it wasn't long before the Scottish government also approached us, and they were organizing what everybody knows now as the Edinburgh process, and of course the very important Edinburgh Declaration that Sue has just talked about. And we are here in 2021. This is also a milestone here for cities and subnational governments, because there is, as Sue mentioned, there's a renewed decision and plan of action that has been tabled, and we are certainly hoping that it will be adopted at COP whenever it takes place, and there is going to be another summit, and again as an official parallel event. Now, as far as specifically the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework process, as I said just now, ICLEI, together with our partners, have mobilized the local and subnational government constituencies through a number of ways. Besides these webinars and the Edinburgh process, which ICLEI was a partner to, there were a number of webinars that were held as a result of that. ICLEI was also one of the first signatories of the declaration, and through our networks we are encouraging many of our members and also the cities that we have projects in or we have relationships with to sign up to the declaration. And similar to the situation with subnational governments, there's also an advisory committee for cities. And ICLEI has a global ambassador for local biodiversity in the person of Mayor Plant of Montreal. She chairs this committee, and we also use that as a mechanism to communicate with our political leadership at the city level, on the one hand, about the policy positions that are coming out from the Global Biodiversity Framework, but on the other hand, also to gather their inputs and to communicate that back into the CBD processes. And then ICLEI also has various GEXCOM champions. We have, for example, the governor of Yucatan State in Mexico, who leads up our biodiversity portfolio, and he is supported by Councillor Amanda Stone from Eura Council in Australia. And there are many mayors and deputy mayors in cities, ICLEI cities across the globe, for example, in Europe and elsewhere, that also champion the biodiversity agenda. And then, of course, ICLEI, together with its network partners, have coordinated as a major group within the CBD process. And as a result of this, we have submitted we've participated in the open-ended working group meetings, the formal and informal sessions of the subsidiary bodies from 2019, and we've made joint statements that are presented at these meetings and tabled there and taken into account by the parties, as well as written comments on the various documents that have come out. Now, I think the significance of the Edinburgh process outcomes is specifically that we see it as a game changer. You know, I think it's important to note that the CBD is probably a front runner as far as recognizing the role of local and subnational governments through the fact that it allows for a very clear and dedicated action plan. But on the other hand, there are also institutional mechanisms, as these two advisory committees that I mentioned earlier, that are set up in terms of the action plan, the first one, and again in the proposed next one, it's continued. And the other thing that I think is so exciting coming from the SABSTA and the SBI meetings now in the past 2 months or so is that there's been very strong support from several CBD parties. And I think here, for example, of the EU and member states, Mexico, Canada, Colombia, Japan, Ecuador, United Kingdom, Peru, Argentina, Uganda. And you know, what is so interesting is to see that even within this digital time where it's very hard to lobby, there is still so much support. You can see the photograph on the screen there, that is Sue. She's reading the CBD, proposed decision on cities and subnational governments with a plan of action on the virtual platform. And I think the other thing that is important is to realize that the voice of cities is being heard in these platforms, and hopefully the parties will adopt this new decision. So as I said earlier, we've presented many statements together. That's myself, where we responded to the statement or the proposed decision that Sue, on behalf of the United Kingdom government, read, and it was strongly supported, and it was sponsored by the EU, Uganda, Colombia, Peru, which is important because that shows that the parties are behind and support the stronger position and engagement, optimal engagement of cities in the new framework that will hopefully be presented and adopted at COP. And at the moment, we are working together to present our ideas and plans for how the plan of action can be implemented. And the last thing that I want to say is that there's also been quite a lot of lobbying sort of on a one-on-one level between for example, Scotland and the Quebec government and various other subnational governments, but also the networks like ourselves, Regions 4, Committee of Regions, the Goals Group, with various friends of what we countries that are supportive of this participation. And then finally, just to say that there has been a series, and there still are, a series of dialogues between the national governments and the subnational governments and city governments in several countries that ICLEI has been involved in, together with the support of the Post-2020 Biodiversity Framework Support Project and Expertise France. And for example, they've been recently held in Peru, Colombia, Mexico, and they're currently in South Africa, and then there are some more dialogues planned for China and for Canada. And with that, I want to leave you. There are some website links, and we will post those links in the chat box where you can find a lot more information. And I am going to hand back to the technical team because we will now have a presentation from Shu Zhu, and then it looks like we will have some time. I see there has been 1 or 2 questions, so we will hopefully have some time for questions afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks to my colleagues for organizing such a nice event, and also it's my pleasure to give an update about the preparation status of the 7th Global Summit of Local and Subnational Governments under the COP15 this year. So first of all, I have to admit that there has been a lot of uncertainty on the logistic and the overall plan of the COP15. So it also has a direct impact on the preparation of the 7th summit. That's why we have not provided timely update and information to all the partners and concerned the local and subnational governments about the plan. However, today is a good opportunity to let you know the overall picture and also our initial thinking in order for you to be informed. So first of all, my colleagues, Kobe and also the previous speaker already touched upon the previous Global Summit. That is an official parallel event under the COP. So we have held the 6th summit together by ICLEI and all the partners. I think this is a very important platform to inform the local and subnational government constituency on the CBD Convention, and also voice our concerns and also recommendations to the parties on the implementation and local actions. So it is very important to have such a platform to extend and share also our actions and best practices. So following to the previous 6 summits, now we're planning to have the 7th one on the COP15 in Kunming, China. We all know that this COP has been postponed already twice. Now it's scheduled on the 11th to 24th of October this year. However, there is still uncertainty as so far the CBD Secretary has not announced the logistic plan, including the detailed plan for the 8 parallel events. So the 7th summit is one of it. We are still working with the CBD Secretary and also the Chinese government as host to confirm the specific date. But we have already, among the key organizing partners, we have already proposed to both to have this summit in parallel or back-to-back with the COP15 in order to facilitate the exchange between the local subnational government delegates with the parties. So initial plan is to have a key summit events for 2 days, but also some side events might last longer. And this year, due to the impact of the COVID, it might be a hybrid format of both having an offline venue in Kunming City, China, but also many might have to participate virtually through online platform. So according to the agreement between CBD sector and also the host government, so there will be 4 co-hosts: CBD sector, the Ministry of Ecology and Environment of China, Yunnan provincial government, the host region of COP15, as well as ICLAI, and also China Environment News and Kunming municipal government will be co-organizing, providing logistic support to the organization of this summit. But in addition, we have also a number of, not to name all of them here, partners who are working closely with the ICLAI and the host on the preparation and organization of the 7th summit, including, for example, our colleagues also mentioned, the EU Committee of Regions, Region 4, the goals, and also some new partners like World Bank, and also the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank as such. So the theme is also reflecting the overall theme of the COP15. We have a preliminary idea to focus on ecological civilization, urban living in harmony with the nature. So this is the overall plan for the 7th summit. Then I'll go to more details. So we have a few objectives in consultation with the major partners and also some of the local subnational governments. First of all, we feel that this would be a good opportunity to improve our local subnational government constituents' understanding of the CBD and also its policy instruments, and strengthen their engagement in the global process, particularly under the this milestone COP to adopt the post-20 global biodiversity framework, but also explore those synergy between the biodiversity agenda with other key global agenda like the climate change and also the sustainable development goals. Secondly, to facilitate dialogues and exchange between local subnational government and the parties, the CBD parties, national governments, as well as international partners to coordinate synergized actions and to integrate biodiversity into urban policy and planning. Thirdly, also is very important is to mobilize additional resources to support local subnational governments' actions in implementing the to be adopted post-2020 global framework. Lastly, but not least, is to promote knowledge sharing and peer learning on local actions and best practices. Also help local and subnational government to really adapt and implement nature-based solutions to cope with their challenges faced brought by the climate change, etc. So it will have plenary session, thematic session, but also we have proposed to the Chinese host to have also a longer time of pavilion for more exchange on a small scale, and also some exhibitions to share some of these cases provided by the participating local subnational governments. So some of the key topics are being listed here, including, of course, explore the engagement of local subnational governments in the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. I think this is also the key objective of the Edinburgh process was mentioned by our colleague Sue from Scotland, and also what local governments and subnational government can contribute to implement the post-2020 global framework. Secondly is to further mainstream biodiversity and ecosystem protection in the urban century and promoting cities in nature. And also some of these specific topics will be related to the protection of urban wetlands, and also the green or ecological industry and circular economy, circular transition in urban context, but also mainstreaming nature-based solution into urban development, and also building synergy between biodiversity, and also other key global agenda like climate change, SDG as mentioned. Another topic will be focusing on the promotion of natural capital and ecosystem services to help our local and subnational government stakeholders to conduct more valuation and assessment on the natural capital they are processing. But also we have also interest to promote extend focusing on ecotourism as a major concern of many local and subnational governments. And also in reflection of the impact of COVID-19 in the cities and regions, another key topic is to explore the enhancement of resilience in the current context and under the pandemic, and also how to secure more finance and resources for local and subnational actions. Of course, to promote dialogue and cooperation between the science and policymakers. So these are the preliminary list of topics that will be focused by the thematic sessions and also other events under the summit. We expect that there will be a number of voluntary initiatives announced by the 7th summit by both of the participating local and subnational governments, and also the network of local subnational government and also CDB parties and partner organizations mentioned. A major outcome paper would be named as a Kunming Declaration, which will reflect the vision and the commitments of cities and regions, how to boost urban biodiversity actions, and particularly with the aim after the adaptation of the new plan of actions, as mentioned by my colleague Kobe. And also this outcome paper will be submitted and voiced to the COP15 parties by the high-level segments. This, of course, will need to be confirmed if that same will be organized in parallel with the COP15 high-level segment. But also a proposal from the host country, China, is to launch a so-called Biodiversity Charming City Award. This will start from the 7th summit. Maybe for the first award, we will focus on China, then maybe later on we'll scale up to a global level. So this will be led by both ICLEI and one of the co-organizers of the summit, the China Environment News. But of course, we are also in close consultation and communication with all the key partners and stakeholders on other expected outcomes. So we welcome also proposal recommendations from all of you, all the community of local subnational governments to provide your recommendation, advice, and insights on what outcomes and initiatives might be presented at this summit. Some of the examples just listed, one of them is the updated version of the Singapore City Biodiversity Index. And also ICLEI team here in East Asia and China, we are also working with the Singapore National Park Boards closely to develop and translate the new version into Chinese. We are going to use this summit to launch it in our region, but also promote the new version to a global scale. Another one is what Kobe just mentioned, the Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature platform as a major knowledge sharing, reporting, and commitment platform. We encourage more local subnational governments and partners to join this, to work together with us to facilitate such kind of exchange of knowledge, actions, and also commitments. So as said, there is certain challenge and uncertainty about the final date and the logistic plan of the 7th summit. But before that, our work cannot be stopped, and our exchange, like today's advocacy webinar, have never been stopped. We also welcome to work with our partners and also local subnational stakeholders to organize a number of preparatory events towards the 7th summit. So one of them, or also the upcoming one, will be actually by next week on 9th of July, with a focus of the webinar to promote the engagement of local and subnational governments and also the related stakeholders into the Edinburgh process for the post-2020 framework. This webinar will have a focus on China, but of course we also will invite number of international participants, including, for example, as you can see, the Aichi prefecture, who is leading also the goals, as well as this webinar is co-organized between ICLEI and the Scottish government, the team in Beijing, but also with the support of CBD Secretariat and also the Ministry of Environment Ecology of China. We have already invited a number of key regions and cities, as you see, like Beijing, Yunnan province, the host region, and also Kunming. We will be speaking here, and we will provide English and Chinese interpretation by the webinar. So we welcome you to join this exchange and virtual dialogue with us. At this summit, we will of course discuss and elaborate the ideas and proposals on preparing the 7th City Summit. So this is a good opportunity for us to further elaborate on the Edinburgh process and post-2020 framework, but also to reinforce our joint actions and commitment towards contributing to the global biodiversity process and new targets under the new framework, which is expected to be adopted by the COP15. So below down by the left side, there is a QR code that you can scan and get the Zoom link and register yourself for this webinar. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me or my colleagues for assistance. We welcome you, and we look forward to see you at the webinar on 9th of July. So that is my brief update on the summit and also plan. We will keep you updated in the coming weeks and months when we have more confirmation on the logistics and the dates, particularly together also with the other ICLEI offices and the colleagues. So if you have any questions or any proposal, so please try to follow up with this email address and also our website information, but also contact me, always being welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shu. That was really a very informative session that and a lot of information that you've shared. And I think sadly, one of the difficulties that we find ourselves now living in this time of a global pandemic is the fact that there is so much uncertainty. One really doesn't know. Shu referred to the fact that it has been postponed. The COP has been postponed twice. I can also just report to people attending this webinar that at a CBD flotilla, which is the group that gets together that deals with the communications aspect around the CBD processes, and that is not just from the Secretariat, but it's from all kinds of organizations such as ICLEI, WWF, you name it, they're all on that flotilla. It's a very big group. That they had a meeting in this week, and there was an information shared that it looks like the COP may be postponed again. There was no details provided, and there hasn't been an official announcement or notification yet from the Executive Secretary. But the talk that is going around the town at the moment is that, again, because of the ongoing pandemic and the fact that the rollout of vaccinations is slow in many countries, it looks like there may be a further postponement, and what will in all probability happen is that it'll be a very small, high-level event, very ceremonial, sort of passing over the baton from Sharm el-Sheikh, the previous COP, to the new COP hosts, China, and maybe just some very high-level political people there. And that the official sort of negotiation part of the COP would probably then only take place in next year. There's a lot of speculation around what it'll be, when it'll be, etc. And it wouldn't be responsible of me to give any details because I don't have details. So what I do want to say is please keep tuning into these webinars. Use our website. I'm going to ask my colleagues just to put in the advocacy website link again. We use that as the tool to communicate with our constituency. We keep it updated in terms of the latest news. We also have our email updates. If you have not yet registered for those email updates, the place to register is through these webinars. And then just to say that there was a question that dealt specifically with information on logistics, whether there'll be in-person events, online side events, call for events, and all of those sorts of things. I hope it's clear from my response that at the moment, and also from Shu's presentation, that at the moment we cannot give a straight, direct, definitive answer to this. We're all waiting. It depends on the powers to be, the Secretariat and the Bureau of the CBD, as well as the host country and obviously the wider UN community. So hopefully we will have some more information about that shortly. There was just also another question which dealt with the link or how will the outcomes from the CBD lead into the COP. As you know, the COP has also been postponed again, and often, and that's why it's also so complex, you know, when these things, the dates do take place. One of the things I do know is that obviously there has been a lot of discussion within the CBD on the new global biodiversity framework, that one needs to make the linkages between the different Rio conventions. So that's, yes, the CBD and the UNFCCC, the climate COP, but also the one on desertification, to make those linkages stronger, particularly with the climate COP. So there is a policy document available on that. But at a practical level, I think one of the things that I found very interesting is when you listen to the discussions within the UNFCCC major group for local and subnational governments. One of the messages is that the way in which the CBD is recognizing the contribution of local and subnational governments is, in a sense, a model for other conventions to follow, both in respect of having structures, institutional structures, to create a bridge between the parties and the local and subnational governments, such as we have through the 2 advisory committees, but also in the form of having a concrete action plan, which is something that is quite unique, as I said earlier. So we are really hopeful that there will soon be another COP so that these decisions can go forward. I think that everybody is very aware of the fact that we are we're running out of time. And then I think the last thing that I just want to say is that it's also important to not underestimate the contribution that even the smallest town or village on the planet can make. And in this respect, I call on all city representatives and towns to please take your actions. There's already a lot being done, whether it is by protecting the rivers or ensuring that there's no pollution in wetlands, etc., or putting out protected areas. These actions, collective local action, can make a huge, big global impact. And with this, I want to just share my last slide, which is about the Cities with Nature platform, and just to say that I encourage cities that have yet to sign up to Cities with Nature to please do so. This is not an ICLEI platform or mechanism. It's a partnership initiative between the IUCN, ICLEI, the Nature Conservancy, WWF, UNEP. Oh, there are many, many more. And it's free. It's an online place where cities and soon also regions, because we are creating the Regions with Nature platform as well, which is a sister platform, where they can get together in a virtual safe space and they can share experiences, they can learn from each other, they can inspire from each other. We will, in the next few days, be launching what we call our Tools and Resources Hub. You heard Renata talk about some interesting tools and case studies. These are the sorts of things that we bring in under our Cities with Nature big tent. There are many, many more. And these are things that cities will don't necessarily find easily, because there is so much information outside. But if you have it all together in one virtual digital space, it's so much easier to find it. And then I think something else that's very important, we're also working with our various partners, specifically also with some of the regional governments that we have close contacts with, Regions 4, Committee of Regions, the Secretariat of the CBD, in developing what we call our action platform. This is where we are going to link up to the CBD's action agenda for people and nature, so that cities can actually report their actions that they're taking on the ground, and that this can all be aggregated up in terms of the global actions that are being taken around the world to protect the nature in our cities, and also the regional areas, and our very fragile and very valuable biodiversity. And with that, I want to say thank you to everybody for joining our webinar. I hope there are not any further questions. And if there are, I'll stop now, just have a look quickly in the chat box. But just to say again that we will be sharing these recordings on our website. And then just to say that our next webinar takes place on the 5th of August, same time, same place, and I hope to see many more people there. So thank you so much, and have a good day or good evening further.